Hey everyone, welcome in. We've got folks filing in right now. We'll give everybody a few minutes before we get kicked off.
Yeah, looking forward to rolling. I see some familiar names that have popped in already, so definitely excited to share the next 30 to 45 minutes with everybody. While you're trickling in, throw in the chat kind of where you're dialing in from, and then who is your college team, either your alma mater or who you're picking to win the tournament this year.
Ooh, Purdue vote. Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's their year, Chris. They got the best player in the country. They've been to that Final Four. I think this time they're going to finally get it done.
All right. Well, I'm staying true to my state. Go Vols. Maybe this is the year. We'll see.
We'll give it another 60 seconds and then we'll get rolling. Really excited to kind of share what we have in store for everybody. Tis the season. We know that y'all have really busy weeks kicking off, your year coming out of SKOs, right coming near the end of Q1. So we definitely hope that you'll find some value in this next hour. Chris, let's get rolling if you're ready. Do you want to kick us off and kind of share with the team a little background?
Sure. Yeah, as Brian said, thanks for joining. This is, in my opinion, the best time of year to be kicking off some kind of competition for your teams. Typically, you're coming out of some new year, kind of kickoff. You've got new goals, you've got new objectives you're trying to hit. And what better way to like really stoke the momentum and get people excited than a competition? And then pairing it with March Madness is really a win-win. And so give you a little bit background on like why we're here. Real quick, before coming to Ambition, I was an Ambition customer myself. I notice a number of customers who have joined, so welcome. And then I led the sales development team here at Ambition for a few years, and now am leading the account management group. In both departments, we're really big on competitions, so run them regularly. And so, yeah, excited to talk to some of the specifics today on like how you can, spin those up and then make sure they're effective.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And as you heard, Chris moved from our sales development org over to account management. When he did that, he made the mistake of promoting me to take the team over. But yeah, before Ambition, I had used Ambition at a really large outsource SDR firm. So we had 150 SDRs using Ambition's kind of gamification engine to power like March Madness contest. And then obviously over the past few years, I've been able to run some of those contests internally with our own products. So really excited to share with you kind of our point of view on not only running a March Madness style contest, but like Chris said, how to leverage contests and incentives to really power behavior change and business outcomes. So Chris, I'll kick it back to you to kind of set the stage.
Yeah. So specifically today, we're going to talk about what I would consider longer term competition. So anything that's a month plus, I would consider a long term competition. Um, every competition can have its own bit of flavor. Sometimes you're going to want to run a quick competition at the end of the month for a call blitz, maybe 2 or 3 hours, something to like really juice the numbers. But today, what we want to talk about is that longer term competition, because what that really gets into is the psychology behind really what moves the needle for sales teams or just any metric driven organization. And so we'll talk specifically about kind of how we within Ambition would frame up a bracket style competition, but then also we'll just talk in generalities like best practices for these types of competitions. You'll notice on this slide, I've listed 3 words at the bottom. And for me, those are really important when it comes to these longer term competitions, because effectively what you're doing with a competition like this is you're setting what the mindset should be for your reps on what's important. So the KPIs that they should care about, the right targets, and then you're reinforcing that behavior and then driving accountability to it over a long period of time. So today we're going to talk about time frame of competitions, and I'm going to suggest 6 weeks for this competition. So over that period of time, you're really reinforcing those habits, those behaviors, changing mindset, changing behavior, and then ultimately changing the culture of your sales team, which is super important. So that's the quick frame up for what we're going to be talking about today. So Brian, you can go right to that time frame slide. I just mentioned it. Ambition, like the number one reason that people don't run competitions is the admin involved with the competition. So setting it up, doing all the scoring, notifying people when it started, when it finished, who's in the lead, all of those kind of things take a lot of time. And so ambition is going to take a lot of that burden off your plate. And so it's super easy with an ambition, creating a fantasy style competition. You can choose how long we want to run this. So for a fantasy for March Madness, I'm going to suggest 4 weeks of kind of these play-in games, head-to-head matchups that ultimately gets you to 2 weeks at the end of playoffs, which will be your Final Four and your final in those 2 weeks. And so we'll walk through some more screenshots of exactly what that looks like, but ambition makes it really easy to spin that up. And then once you've created it, what it's going to do is send a notification to everyone involved. So it lets them know that it's kicking off, keeps them updated on scores and things like that. So we'll talk a little bit more about best practices around driving awareness to this, but certainly at the beginning, you want to build a lot of excitement on the kickoff. The last thing you want is a couple of your reps to say, wait, we've got a competition going on? Like what? And so that's the frame up on the time. We're going to, suggest 6 weeks for this, 4 for the play-in games, and then 2 weeks at the end for the Final Four and final matchup. So I'm talking a lot. Brian, what would you add to that?
I think one thing that I think is important to call out is springing a competition upon a team sometimes isn't the best way to launch one. You want to build hype around the upcoming contest, right? You want people to know it's coming. You want to create, kind of this idea of what are we going to be competing on? What metrics am I going to be focused on? And going back to some of the behavior change stuff Chris talked about, right? There's probably a couple things coming out of SKO that you're thinking about and using, a March Madness style competition to drive that behavior change is going to be a really powerful engine instead of just, ruling with the stick and telling people, hey, email's getting really hard to deliver with all of Google's new guidelines. We're going to need to be making 15 to 20 extra calls a day. We're going to need to be calling VPs and up. We're going to need to be doing these changes. Insert your, kind of new expectations in 24. Think about that as kind of a KPI you'll use, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But hyping the contest up and making sure people know it's coming is really crucial to get buy-in. Talking about competitors, right? So March Madness probably grabbed your attention. Running a big bracket style probably grabbed your attention. But unless you have a team of exactly 64 people, your competition's gonna look a little bit different than the March Madness bracket. And I think when we talk about long-term competition, right? So a month or longer, it's a really great idea to drive cross-functional collaboration. So getting SDRs to have AEs on their team, maybe pairing a CSM up with an account manager, whatever your team looks like, think about how do I create cross-functional teams, right? So you may be thinking, well, Brian, account executives and SDRs have different KPIs. You can't really compete head to head with them. If you're an ambition customer, you can. We're able to really normalize scoring. If you're not, think about the values of those leading indicators of success and figure out a way to essentially score them equally. So the equivalent of an AE closing a 30K deal uh, to an SDR may be sourcing a $300,000 opportunity in the pipeline. So normalizing scoring and ambition is going to allow you to do that really easily. But think about different ways to put different reps together. And if you don't want to do that outside of your team, think about pairing senior reps with newer reps. Think about pairing enterprise reps with SMB reps, right? How do you really drive collaboration in your org? And then lastly, like getting a buy-in from your team is crucial. So March Madness gives you the ability to really theme out your competition. Each team's going to pick a college. Preferably, you're going to pick a college that's going to make it into the tournament. But if not, getting people to, wear their team colors on calls, getting managers to really talk to the members of each team as if they were the Tar Heels or the Boilermakers, are a really good way to drive just camaraderie across the team. Chris, when you think about competitors and kind of selecting, how you're going to compete, what would you add here?
Yeah, Brian, I wanted to touch on one thing that you briefly said there. I feel like one of the biggest bits of feedback that I get from customers is how do I run a competition where I've got like half of my team are kind of green. They're newer in the role, not really sure, like they haven't built up a book of business yet. And then we've got these veterans on the team who always win the competitions. It's going to be deflating, if the same person wins every time. Like how do you normalize that? And I would say like there's multiple answers to that question. Like one, if you're doing a team competition, you want to pair those people up. So like pair a new rep with a veteran, and make sure that like looking at their past numbers, it looks like you're setting up even teams. And then also within ambition, there's the ability to create separate roles. So if you've got an SDR role, you can create a senior role and then a junior role, and then have the KPI expectations be a little bit different for each of those on the scorecard. And that way you can, built in within the platform, kind of normalize what Brian's talking about. But that's one thing that I always think about when people are creating competitions. They really hesitate because they're like, I don't want to go to all of this work if the same people are going to win every time, and then it's going to be deflating for the rest of the people on the floor. And so that's one thing I think we can pretty easily address within ambition, and I think it's important to think about as you're spinning up these teams.
Yeah, that's a really good call out. And a good segue right into, diving into that scoring.
So yeah, scoring is like so crucial. As you all probably know, you want to pick the right KPIs that are going to like measure, actual success for the team and for the business. If you pick some KPIs that, the business doesn't care about, then, it's going to be deflating for everyone. And so I would always suggest picking a grouping of both leading indicators and lagging indicators. So some of those metrics that are more effort based, things that your reps can control, calls, emails, prospects added to a sequence, and then your lagging indicators, the opportunities created, the pipeline, the closed won deals, whatever that may be, and compete with all of those metrics together so that we've got a full picture of what a successful day, week, or month looks like for that rep in the competition. And what's great about ambition is you can give different point totals for each of those metrics in order to weight them appropriately. So, classic example I would always give is like, we want to track calls and emails for our reps, but like that should be like 1 point. Whereas if they get a meeting set or, they close a deal, like things like that, those should be 50, 100 points. And that way you're weighting those appropriately, and, someone can't win for just like making a ton of dials. One big theme that like has always been important, but I'm hearing it more and more now is like those quality type metrics. So I don't really care that my reps are doing a bunch of activity. I want to know that quality is coming from those. This is your best way to really dial in and make sure we're holding them accountable to the metrics that are going to really drive the business forward. Um, and then the other thing here that I think we could do a whole webinar on is like the importance of getting buy-in from your leadership team. If your reps know that everyone in the organization is going to be paying attention to this, especially leadership, it's going to carry a different weight for them. You know, it's going to already hold them accountable, but this is just going to go the extra route to help them know that this is important to the business. Um, so yeah. So any questions there? I'll pause. I mean, this is a big topic on scoring. Any questions in the chat around metrics or how to score a competition? Brian, what would you say is like best practice for the number of metrics to look at in a competition?
I think it's pretty variable, based on org and org size and team. You know what I mean? But I would, if you're a high volume team, kind of in the top of the funnel, no more than no more than five metrics. I think less is more sometimes. Three to me is a sweet spot that you can drill in on. Um, Chris mentioned something else like the buy-in from leadership uh, throughout the competition. Right. So like making sure, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but making sure that this data is easily accessible if you're not using Ambition, right? And you're able to find this data. That's another thing, right? People need to understand what they're competing on. And when we're able to very easily um, very easily track that and have leaderships check in with reps, you're going to drive, more results. Nothing's worse than a competition starting and 2 weeks goes by and no one talks about it and everyone forgets and all of a sudden someone wins, tickets to a concert, right? It's pretty deflating. Chris, a question in from Jessica. Any advice for scoring outbound only reps versus inbound? My inbound reps book about 3 times more than my outbound team and I have trouble including her in competitions. You want to take that one?
Yeah, this is a really good one. Thanks for that question, Jessica. I ran into this problem so many times when I was running the team. We had 20 outbound reps and one inbound rep. He desperately wanted to be a part of competitions, and it was a little bit more difficult. I would say if you are an Ambition customer and you're using our scorecards, what you can do is create a separate scorecard for the inbound rep. And as long as you're using the activity score or the objective score in the competition, you can help normalize it, very similar to how we have AEs competing against STRs and are able to normalize that. So that's one solution. I would say the other solution, Jessica, I would say is probably like try to do a team competition and then pair them. If you've got teams of three, maybe that inbound rep is like a team of two, just to compensate for and make it a little bit more even. Um, that's certainly hard, but you wanna include them as much as possible. So those would be my two suggestions for that scenario.
And then saw a question from John. Do you get input from users on scoring? Correct me if I'm wrong, John. I'm assuming users means like your reps or your team, the people participating. I think it's a really good idea to loop in, um, depending on the size of your team, but definitely get feedback from your reps on when you're setting scoring parameters, right? Like you as a leader probably have a really good pulse of benchmarks and kind of what the team's doing today. But I think it is a great idea to get feedback from your team on like, hey, is this too much, right? Is this going to be, is this going to hurt if we bring a focus to this metric that we've never talked about versus helping? There definitely are KPIs that you shouldn't compete upon. So I think it is a really good idea to get feedback from users because they may see something that you don't. And again, making sure you really do your due diligence on scoring before you start the competition is going to prevent a runaway train. And what that is a team or a rep that gets out so far ahead in the first couple of weeks that the rest of the team goes, "Oh, there's no way I'm going to catch up with Chris. He's so far ahead." And again, it deflates kind of where you're going. So yeah, definitely a good idea to get feedback from some of your reps.
All right, so the screenshot that you're looking at here is once we get into the playoffs section of the fantasy style competition, this is what it's going to look like. This is the bracket's going to look like. So this is your final four setup, and then once they move past that week, they get to the final. So this is what it's going to look like. Ambition again is going to do all of this like legwork for you from a scoring and from a bracketing standpoint. Um, and yeah, this is the fun part when it gets really exciting. Now, what the question you may be asking yourself is like, cool. So, so four teams make it to the playoffs. What about what about the rest of the team? We still like they still have to be working. They still have to be motivated. All that kind of stuff. Ambition takes that into account as well. So you've got your final four here, but there is, for lack of better words, like a loser's bracket where they're still competing to be placed. So you've got, multiple chances to continue working your way up the leaderboard if you aren't in the playoffs. But this is kind of what your playoff outlook will be. So if you have any other specific questions around like how it's structured, I'm happy to like stay after and kind of walk you through that live. But this is what the kind of playoff section is going to look like. Again, as Brian mentioned earlier, like this is when you're going to really want to drive attention to the folks that have made it this far, who are winning at the top of the leaderboard. This is a fun way to like drive a little bit of excitement about the finals.
Yeah, I would double down with Chris. Like if you're interested to see more about what it looks like prior to this, definitely hit us up at the end. We'll stay on. Um, but yeah, this is definitely the culmination right at the end and going back to the timing of it all. Like if you do time it up alongside really the March Madness schedule. The actual championship game is in April, so it really does work out to a perfect like 4 weeks of regular season and 2 weeks of playoffs. Um, Prizes, man, I think I'm extremely bullish on prizes. I think a lot of people, especially salespeople and old school sales leaders, when they think contests, they think like tchotchkes or, a gift card, or just some boring thing that's not actually going to motivate anybody. When you think about prizing, this is essentially, what's in it for your reps. So when you say, "Oh yeah, you're going to get a $500 Amazon gift card or a $100 gift card to, Costco," like if I don't shop on Amazon or I don't go to Costco or I'm not a fan of whatever gift card you're choosing, it's not really that motivating to me, right? If I'm an account executive at the top of the leaderboard, always making a ton of money, gift card's not going to actually motivate me, right? So, how do you motivate that behavior with a carrot at the end of the tunnel? And I think thinking outside of the box is really big here. So, tickets to a sporting event are a great way to, add a little bit more of that sports flair. I know sometimes sports and sales are synonymous and you don't have to be a sports fan to be a good seller and vice versa. But think about concert tickets, right? Think about sporting events. Think about a one night getaway stay at a luxury hotel, right? Experiences are things that people talk about, right? You want people to tell the story of March Madness, a competition March Madness that we did last year, we gave away 12 different prizes, and I have reps that don't work for me anymore that still talk about that competition today. We sent one rep to Puerto Rico, right? A 3 night stay at this really nice resort in Puerto Rico. And he tells people about that to this day. So like, you want people to talk about what they're winning. Another really good thing are punishments, punishing the losing team, punishing the manager of the losing team. One thing we did here, like a year or two back, is the bottom team had to sing karaoke in front of the whole company on a Zoom, which can be pretty motivating if you're scared to publicly speak or sing. So think about, fun ways to punish your team. Maybe the losing team has to wear the winning team's uh, team colors, right? There's a lot you can do there to motivate. And the last thing I'll put in here are thresholding prizes. So think about not just prizing for the top of the leaderboard, but prizing for teams or reps that make it to a certain threshold. What this is going to do is going to allow you to still kind of squeeze the sponge on your reps when you're in that last week of the regular season, right? There's going to be a team that's 0-4 or 1-3 that knows they can't make it to the final four. But if you have a threshold expectation that is still within range, they're going to want to get there, right? So everybody that makes it to 90% of quota is going to get this prize. Everybody that, does this new quality, activity that we're expecting is going to get this prize. So not only should you be prizing first place and second place, but think about thresholding prizing for the rest of your team. Chris, what are some other like fun prizes or punishments or things that you would recommend outside of a silly old gift card?
I think in addition to the prizes, another element that's really important is just like the public recognition. And sometimes that's like a given, but I think it is important to go above and beyond and make sure we talk about leadership buy-in. Make sure your like CEO, sends a separate message to the winner or the winning team and, shouts them out or goes to dinner with them, takes them to lunch. I think that goes a long way. I mean, sometimes like I remember in the past, like getting cash prizes and that's awesome. But like going to lunch with the CEO was kind of priceless early in my career. And so I think that's one element that's important. And another one that kind of falls into this category that I also think is important is just like the healthy banter slash like trash talk between your teams and reps, and like you as the manager can help fuel that and again keep it healthy. We don't want it to get toxic, but I think that's another important element to like get really people excited and jazzed up about the competition and potentially winning. So yeah, I would just add to all the things that Brian said, like recognition. He talked about punishments. Like there's nothing better than like a punishment that your manager has to do. So like I remember one that we used to do for call blitzes is for whoever won the call blitz, I had to do the next call blitz for them and like get in the trenches and make calls for them. That's fun. We've done shaved heads for the managers, a number of different things that Brian got in a dunking booth for one competition. So there's unlimited possibilities of stuff that you can do. Again, that like probably everyone here is probably dealing with like budgets that are tight, more than likely, and so you don't have to spend a ton of money to have something that's really exciting and get your reps really involved.
Yeah, sometimes I was scared on how motivated my team got to see me suffer. You know, sometimes I was like, wait a minute, do they actually like me? The thing I'll end with here too is variability, right? Having variability. Not everyone on your team is motivated by money. A lot are. Not everyone on your team is motivated by seeing your manager suffer, but a lot are. So like having variability within your rewards will go a long way. To motivate each type of person that's on your team. Man, we're kind of at the end of the main presentation on those key fundamentals of a competition. Chris, what kind of before we jump into Q&A, any other kind of remarks or things that you want to call out?
Yeah, I was just gonna like try to summarize and kind of recap some of the main points that we talked about. Like I would say number one, like we're talking about longer term competitions here, and the reason we're talking about that is because it really changes the psychology of your reps. If you're doing something, that you want them to do over a 6 week period of time, they're gonna start building up the good habits and the good behaviors that will help you the rest of the year. That becomes muscle memory for a lot of those reps. And then one thing I don't know that we specifically touched on, but it relates here a little bit is we always talk about an ambition like this idea of moving the middle. So if you're managing a team, you understand that like you're going to have your A players, and they're just a cut above, right? But then you also have this big grouping that you would probably consider B and C players, and competitions like this is really going to drive that group and allow you to see some big improvements from that group. The A players are probably going to perform really highly regardless of whether you have a competition or not, but probably 70% of your team is sitting in that B or C graded type players. And so that's really what's going to help push them in a competition like this. So yeah, time frame, 6 weeks at least. Recognition, super important. The scoring is probably the most important aspect of this. And then Brian touched on prizes and how important that is. So those are kind of my big takeaways from this.
Yeah, I would say my takeaways would be, obviously retweeting and echoing that, but the attention to detail and thought the leadership puts into a competition is very evident to the team, right? So if your team sees like, dang, Chris put a ton of work into this. He's wearing a Tar Heels jersey on our kickoff call, and the CEO's, ringing the bell, and these prizes seem pretty cool. And wow, we're being scored on all these different things. Like that shows versus just hey, let's have a 6 week contest, the most revenue wins, right? Like so the thought and preparation and attention to detail you put into competitions is the difference between a tchotchke competition uh, and something that's crucially beneficial for your business, right? It can make a massive impact on you hitting your number and not. So I would just say, yeah, definitely it's worth planning and taking the time when you're doing something of this scale. You will see results and it'll be worth it. So what questions does everyone have? I know some folks are trickling out as we wind down, but anyone left? I think we have one from Deepak. If you have 100 people and want to rate them, would you not always have a big section of what you call B and C players, who those are or who those are may change?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, folks I would never say are kind of stuck in those categories. There's quite a bit of ebb and flow as they get deeper into the role, get into new territories, like get sharper at certain skills. But I would say, if you've got a team of 100, you picking your top 10, those are your A players. Like that's probably certainly there's probably more that are high performers, but the ones that don't really need a whole lot of coaching, they're just kind of like um, performing at that high level regardless. Like that's kind of like it's different for every team, but that's kind of how I think about it. And then you've got like 70% that are in that middle section of B or C. And then if they fall below that, they're likely just getting started in the role, or they're on their way out. May not be a good fit for them. So Deepak, I love talking about this kind of stuff. So happy to talk later if that's something we can dig deeper on.
Yeah, like you need to be leveling up that bell curve of B players because those A players are going to graduate, right? They're going to get promoted, they're going to get a better job, they're going to, move somewhere, So I think that's definitely interesting. Question in from Jessica. 6 week competition is a really long time to keep a team motivated and rowing in the same direction, regardless of prize. What are some things we can do to keep the team motivated throughout this competition as well? One-off challenges, double points, day or week. I mean, ding, ding, ding. Right, right. Like those are exact two really good ideas of to keeping that momentum. Chris talked a lot about like leadership buy-in and recognition and getting other departments to kind of interact with your team, but um, throwing micro prizes throughout. One thing that we would do in a longer term competition is we wouldn't call it out, right? We would at the end of the week we'd have a team meeting. We go, hey, we have a surprise prize going out. Sarah led the team this week in the March Madness competition. She just got 3 days of PTO, right? So another cool way is like doing a surprise prize. That way your team doesn't know when it's coming. And then to your point, sometimes it's really good to call out double points. Chris, anything you would add to keep the fire there? It is a long time, I agree.
I mean, the only other thing that I think about that's worked in the past is, our sellers are like, they're so used to hearing from their manager and getting like rah rah from their manager. So that's like, that's normalized for them. But then all of a sudden, if we're in this competition and then our VP of like product, our VP of customer success reaches out and says, "Hey, Brian, I notice you're in the lead in this competition. Like, keep it up, man. This is awesome." And you as a manager can, kind of tap them for that type of recognition. That tends to go a long way, like in the middle of the kind of doldrums of a competition, because if I'm sitting there like, cranking out calls every day or in the middle of this competition, if I know that the VP of product over here is like paying attention as well, like that got some of our reps like a lot more excited and motivated. So, that's another idea to throw in.
Yeah, I like that. Deepak, like having a competition like this does not distract A players from their main focus. I'll read. I know there's a lot of like sales orgs, especially if you have a more complex sale where your A players just want to close their deals and mind their business, right? And I would argue like those like there's a place for that, but I'd also argue like man, I'd much rather have an A player that wants to be involved with his team, or he or she wants to be involved with their team, that wants to participate, that wants to maybe help that C player on their team level up. Like to me, that's an A player, right? An A player is somebody that's going to participate, help the rest of their team that's struggling, and kind of lift people up with them. So I think as long as your metrics are thought out, I don't know. I would agree. I would say it's not distracting. Um, there definitely are people though that aren't motivated by contests, and that's okay, right? Like you got to understand the majority of your team, and I think when you think about your team, you got to think about the majority and not the minority. And the minority is your A players. You don't want to neglect them, right? You don't want to leave them behind, and I don't mean don't not think about them, but like Chris was saying, like what you're going to get out of them, right? You're probably in one-off conversations with them. Those may be the reps that you're asking. What should we score this competition on? So I would say if it's distracting, you're probably in a super complex sale that may be more difficult going into your second point around like pushing the sale when the customer's not ready to take the next step. Um, I think like there's not a one size fits all approach. But Chris, what would you add there? I think Deepak's got some interesting points for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you're right. There's definitely reps that are just going to be like, cool, another competition. Like, I'm still going to be doing all the stuff that I normally do to win. But I think that's a challenge for the manager to make sure also that the KPIs that you're tracking are very relevant. Like that's an area where if you have a lot of reps that are just apathetic, like it could be because you're tracking metrics that they don't find important or they don't feel are like pushing them or the business forward. And so, I mean, that's one thing that I could see. And that's again, you want a holistic look at what success looks like in the role. I know, my previous team, like we had reps that were great on the phone, and then others that were really good at personalizing emails, and others that were great on social. Um, Others that were just really good in discovery calls. And so I think making sure you're representing each of those metrics if you can in a competition is important, because if I'm great on the phone but we're only tracking email conversions, then I'm going to be like, well, this is no fun.
Yeah, that's a good call out. Um, Great questions. Any other questions, comments?
We didn't have many people say who they thought were going to win actual March Madness.
Yeah. I definitely we would love, we are basketball guys. As you can see, Chris has got a little hoop behind him, but um if you are, definitely feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn after. Especially if you're like interested in learning more, just talking shop leader to leader. I think it's a really, interesting topic that sometimes people just assume running a contest is running a contest. And if you do it the right way, I think there's a lot more to that. But yeah, this was a blast. Everyone that kind of came, showed up, had questions, or just hopefully learned something. We definitely appreciate you. You can check me out on LinkedIn, Brian Liebel. And then, Chris, any closing remarks before we hop?
No, thanks for everyone joining. The offer definitely stands. If you have any questions or want to chat after this, like definitely let us know. Connect with us on LinkedIn. Also, you should catch. Brian's super active. He's got his own podcast called Coach's Corner. You should definitely tune into that. Tons of great just recommendations on leadership best practices and performance management, things like that. So definitely check him out for that. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time around.
Awesome. Appreciate you guys.